we get caught up in that poetry side of things. We want it to be and sound and look beautiful. And that's important. We do want alignment. We do want consistency. We want to create something that resonates with the organization. But at the end of the day, the proof is in the proof points. How are we identifying and sharing those in a simple, human, authentic way? Um, is is really, really critical.
Here's a question worth sitting with. What actually separates an employee value proposition that becomes part of the employee experience from one that's just a message on a careers page? It might come down to this. Is your EVP a mirror, ad copy that reflects why talent join and stay? Or is it something more strategic, a compass, a human culture contract, one that pulls on the threads of what the company, the leaders, and employees all commit to giving and all commit to getting back? An employee value proposition in full. That's the conversation more and more leaders are having right now, because employer brand isn't just a talent acquisition function anymore. It's moved to the center of culture strategy. This is Blue Thread Conversations. In this episode, Stacey Parker, co-founder of Blue Ivy Group, sits down with Kristen Cross, Director of Culture Management at Sun Life, one of the sharpest voices working at the intersection of culture, employee experience, and employer brand, alongside Zishan Merchant, Head of Consulting at Blue Ivy Group and Global Employer Brand Advisor. Let's get into it.
For those of you that are listening for the first time, I am Stacey Parker. I am the co-founder of Blue Ivy Group. And today I am joined by my colleague and head of consulting, Zishan Merchant. We're so lucky to have Kristen Cross, who is the head of culture at Sun Life.
Good to have the conversation. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, Kristen, before we get right into it, can you talk a little bit about how you stepped into culture, HR work, and eventually got to employer brand?
Yeah, so I would say it was not a linear path. I'm certainly not today where I might have planned to be in my career. I started out in learning and leadership development, really passionate about ensuring that organizations had strong leaders, strong talent with the right skills and capabilities to drive the organization forward. And there was really a synergy there with my own love of lifelong learning, and believing that strong leadership would make a difference in an organization. And I would say, over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity through great leaders that I had the privilege of working with to be exposed to different aspects of HR and how HR can really drive organizational effectiveness. So I saw the organization through the lens of talent acquisition, through the lens of value proposition, through the lens of keeping our eye on the horizon of what needs to be next for this part of HR so that we are continuing to push the organization forward through the lens of an HR business partner. So feet on the ground with the front line of our business delivering results for clients. And then most recently, stepping into the culture space and bringing together over time culture, how we saw future of work as an enterprise, and then bringing in or bringing back this employee value proposition lens so that really we're looking holistically from a systems perspective at how are we shaping organizational experience, employee experience through value proposition, culture, leadership, and so on. And so I would say, reflecting on my earlier career, I really saw the success of the organization through my vertical, whether it was leadership development or EVP. It was really, this is the one thing that is most critical to driving success. And I would say where I am today is much more of, it is an interconnected system where all of these pieces really need to work together in order to drive the outcomes that we're looking to see from our people and for the organization.
I love that, and it's to me so timely to be
Mm.
able to talk to someone like you who has seen it from so many different, if we call them silos or areas of
Hmm.
expertise, because so many in the industry that touch on employer brand are now really recognizing that for an EVP to gain the traction and the impact it is enabling,
Yeah.
it really does have to touch leadership. It really does have to integrate into the employee experience. Kristen, has your career been entirely built in the financial services industry?
Uh, no.
No.
So I have worked in consulting, so working for organizations that build and deliver learning programs for other companies. So really gaining that outside in perspective on different organizational function and dysfunction and where the intervention is really needed. Spent some time in tech, so working for an organization at a phase of growth and what do they need from a people, talent, skills, leadership standpoint. And then insurance, both property and casualty insurance, which is one sort of area, and then where I am today at Sun Life with financial services, insurance, and health and well-being of
Yeah.
our clients. Yeah.
Kristen, why do you think that the conversation around EVP and culture is getting so much conversation right now? What do you think is driving that?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think more and more organizations are realizing the make or break value of a strong underlying organizational culture. And so critical today. I mean, we have disruption, geopolitical, we've got technology, generative AI, and in that state of what I would say is uncertainty and change, it's more important than ever that we are clear on why are we here, what is at the core of us that we are going to hold on to in all of this flux that people can really rely on from our organization and what we do and how we do it. And then also, how do we ensure that we are resilient and adaptable as an organization? And so much of that comes down to, what is our culture? How do we ensure that people are clear on um, the underlying operating guidelines of how we make decisions when things are unclear, where we lean into, how we know what the right thing to do is, really relies on culture and the underlying value proposition, the promise that we make to our people. So I think that's really driving, and a lot of organizations I think are also looking at evolving, and
Yeah.
so evolving their culture along with what we're seeing in the macro environment. And really a lot of that in Sun Life is no different, is what is true, what is most critical for us about who we are, and where are we evolving, where are we pushing ourselves, and therefore what talent do we need to bring in who will help us push in that direction, who do we want to hold on to that are bringing us to that next level. So I think they're really, really interconnected. And executives see this culture as an opportunity to drive business outcomes amidst all that volatility. So,
So is conversation that you see not just within the walls of
mhm,
HR and people, but it's a conversation you see across the leadership team.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Real strong belief in the value of a strong
Yeah.
organizational culture.
Yeah. And It brings to mind for me a few years ago, post COVID, when there was also a real surgence of we need to have a story about who we are in this moment, and how our culture is evolving for the needs of this time. What do you think is perhaps the biggest element of what's new in this moment versus a few years ago? Because there's a lot of organizations that are looking for a refreshed EVP to help steer some of that. What do you think is the driving force?
I think, and we were working with Blue Ivy in the midst of the pandemic and thinking about our initial value proposition. And really, I think the way we were thinking about it at that time was we need to get clear on what we offer globally. We'd really not done that before. And there was some hesitation from our leadership team, our global HR colleagues saying, this is not the time to define a value proposition because the world is just overturned. The leading advice then was, and I believe it's true even now, is that in times of crisis, in times of challenge, in times when the organization really is being forced to adapt and respond, the true colors really do come out. How you treat your people, how you treat your clients, how you ensure that you're delivering and keeping the well-being of your workforce in a situation like that. And so I think, today is a similar crisis moment with different look and feel. And we're recognizing that we need to take a hard look at ourselves and say, what is it that remains true? What do we need to lean into? The I think often of a body analogy, we've got all the muscles. Some of them are smaller than others. And so where do we need to do the work so that we're building those so that we've got the resilience and the adaptability and the responsiveness and the client centeredness or whatever the case may be for your organization? What do we need to lean into for this world that we find ourselves in right now, so that we're successful?
Yeah, I mean, it leads to like a pretty foundational kind of EVP question is, do you believe that the EVP is meant to be as a reflection, a mirror of what the organization, where the organization is, or do you believe it should be a compass that helps inform future decisions, helps guide leaders towards the culture, the experience they want to create? What's your perspective on
Yeah.
that?
Am I allowed to say both? I
Yeah, that's a
I
great
really
answer.
do believe that it's both. I think, there's an articulation. There's the thing we write down. There's the thing we say we want for our organizational culture, for our people. It's values. It's a culture statement. It's an EVP promise, and that's our desire. That's what we want for our organization. It's the compass. It's the thing
Mm,
that points people in a direction of what is expected. How do we want you to show up here? What is the organization we are aspiring to be? And it's got to have elements of truth, and it's
mhm,
got to have elements of striving and becoming better. And so in that respect, I would say culture, EVP are a compass for the organization. On the flip
yeah.
side, we have employees who day in and day out, in small ways and big ways, are experiencing the delivery of that promise or not. And it's those repeated employee experiences that I think really create what is the lived culture, the experienced EVP. And they tell us really what our culture is. So when,
Mhm,
through employee listening, through external platforms, we hear the actual experience. And in that case, it's the mirror. They're holding it up and
mhm,
telling us, you say this, I'm experiencing this. This is the culture. This is my employee experience. And so I really do think it's both. And, you know, they're so related. What I would say is the ultimate compass for an organization is its purpose. And at Sun Life, we lean into
Mm-hmm.
that very deeply in everything we do, aligning culture to purpose, aligning EVP to purpose, brand, strategy. So to me, that's the ultimate compass. And then everything else is laddering up in service of that.
Yeah, I mean, having worked with you for many years, I can just always feel how Sun Life's purpose really shines through, right? And no pun intended for Sun Life, but it really comes through for in so many ways and serves as a compass. But yeah, to your point, the starting point is where you are right now, right? That's how you start. That's how you build from it. That's how you work towards that compass. So yeah, having both is the perfect answer. Something we've always believed at Blue Ivy is an EVP is more than a talent attraction tool, right? It should serve as more than a talent attraction tool. And you get the most out of it when it's embedded within your talent operating system, when it's felt every day within the culture, within the employee experience, within the communications, within how change management is being done, so many ways. So how does that resonate with how you look at EVP today? And, what advice would you have for any organizations who are still looking at it as a pure talent attraction tool?
Yeah. And if I go back to my prior lens and the vertical I was in, I get that, right? If you're embedded in talent acquisition and the thing you need to do is bring people in the door and you're also responsible for EVP and employer brand, that's the lens. I need this to tell a story externally to bring people in. It goes back to that systems view. And I really think so the way we think about culture and EVP being an aspect of that, it's that, what is the promise? What is the desire? We really think about culture and managing that culture as a system. So it incorporates not only what we say, but how that's being embedded across HR programs, employee life cycle, into the business, through policy, through organizational structure. So I think about translating that promise into a lived experience takes intentional management and embedment across everything. And, you know, in working with you, the Blue Ivy team, you've got a similar model around EVP and really thinking it is not just what we say, the promise that we make. In order to deliver on that, we need to think about where does this show up across the organization. And I would say HR, the myth busting here, like delivering on an EVP is not the job of HR, or certainly not the job of HR alone. We can set up systems and tools, we can embed, but at the end of the day, it's really up to leaders across the business to understand what is the promise that we are making, what is the culture that we are striving for, and how do then I show up in a way that's reinforcing that on a day-to-day basis.
How have you gone about like really trying to embed it within the system successfully, right? Because it does sometimes get stuck, right? So what are some enablers that you've found successful?
So I mean, we've got senior leadership buy-in and support around the desired culture, around the organization that we're trying to create together. We are defining a culture in EVP that is aligned with our purpose, that is in service of the strategy we're working to deliver. And then the build in is to thinking about who, how does this inform who we want to bring into the organization? How does this inform who we promote in the organization? Who are our future leaders? What do we lean into when it comes to development or leadership skills and expectations? Um, how we onboard people, all the way through to what are we recognizing and rewarding when we see something that's not what we want to see more of? How is that addressed? And the ongoing monitoring of how is this showing up across our organization so that we can be responsive to pockets where we need to make changes or emphasize something different is another critical piece. So really very broad brush, but thinking about over time, how are we embedding this across all of those elements, and creating accountability in the business for delivering on our culture and EVP as well.
Yeah, that's key, that accountability
Mhm.
piece. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and, I really appreciate that you have a few times already peppered in the role that leadership
Mm,
plays, and I mean, particularly over the last year, as we have seen the transparency that AI platforms like ChatGPT and Perplexity are providing to general public on leadership, you can really
mhm.
see how the light is shining on the role that leaders need to play right now.
Yeah.
Do you have a clear point of view, Kristen, on the role that leaders themselves need to play in bringing the EVP to life?
Yeah, I think that, it's a great question, Stacey, and I think, well, as we go back to that systems view of things, it's not enough to write something down. It's not enough to just
Yeah.
recruit according to this. Um, Leaders really, I would go back to the myth, HR does not do this alone. Leadership is critical. They are a delivery mechanism within the organization. And when I think about, culture and culture management, which is what I'm really focused on for Sun Life, I think about how we are not just saying something, we're really doing things deeply in the enterprise. And we're shaping the organizational fabric on which people operate, right? And so leaders in their day to day can influence and shape the systems, the reinforcement mechanisms that make an employee experience on the ground level feel lived. And that is far more than the talent decision they made last month on who to bring into the organization. That is how they're conducting one-on-ones with their people, the key messages they're reinforcing in town halls, how they are shaping decision making within their organization. All of these things come down to individual leaders, yes, at the senior level, absolutely, and especially at the front line where they've got those direct interactions, on a daily basis with their people. So leadership is absolutely huge, and I think, we can create the frameworks. We can, uh, put the direction out there. Then we really need to equip and enable our leaders to deliver on that promise.
We with our I know we Leander and I have shared with you some of the big edge intelligence platform that we've built,
Mm.
that's listening externally to organizations reputation and their leadership and culture, and just validating your point on the fact that it's not just top of house leaders that need to um, uh, live the EVP, but it is
Yeah.
also that frontline manager director where we consistently see the breakdown in an employer brand's reputation is in that middle
Mhm.
space. A very challenging role to play because you often don't get clarity of strategic decision in a timely manner. You're hearing a lot of noise from individual contributors that you have to try and settle. That particular role is so important to be able to have a clear identity in what the EVP and employee experience is for sure. We've been talking a lot of late about not just the importance of kind of governance of EVP for leaders, but that there's such an incredible opportunity for them right now to define their own identity as leaders because their profiles are so public now
Yeah.
that using the EVP and culture is such an incredibly powerful opportunity for them to lift their own identity and brand. What do you think, Kristen, leaders underestimate when it comes to this work?
I really think, and we've talked about this a little bit, but if I were to share some dichotomies or places where I think there's a lot of emphasis on getting this right when really what matters is getting that right. I think what I see is, a real emphasis on the polished corporate messaging. Let's get that right. And in reality, what is more important is the power of people driven messaging. To your point about AI, human employee stories, yes, the ones that organizations help employees tell, but also the ones they are telling in forums we have no control over, says more about our culture and on our employee value proposition than any polished corporate message ever will. And I think where the trust goes, if we're thinking about external talent, if we're thinking about our employees, the trust goes to those authentic messages, not the polished ones. So I think that's one difference in emphasis that we see. And it's related to the second, which is really that there's a real emphasis on what we say. And where the emphasis actually needs to be is on what we do. How are we every single day living up to the values, the cultural expectations, the promise we make to our people? So we get really a lot of emphasis on what we say. More needs to be thought about in terms of what we do and how leaders are showing up, both within their organization, but also what they're putting out there. We get caught up in that poetry side of things. We want it to be and sound and look beautiful. And that's important. We do want alignment. We do want consistency. We want to create something that resonates with the organization. But at the end of the day, the proof is in the proof points. How are we identifying and sharing those in a simple, human, authentic way, um, is really, really critical.
Mm. If I wasn't
Mhm.
disruptive, I would stand up and clap because I like believe so wholeheartedly in that, and so quotable, Kristen. The why, which is how you kind of started this. Why do organizations want EVP right now? It really is this human contract that is helping to guide and steer this moment in time and provide direction on where we're heading. Um, and that human contract is not going to be determined by just polished copy. And there is far too much focus on just that, and the beautiful copy, the beautiful imagery of the employer brand as the prize, when the
Yeah.
prize is actually in the momentum of the organization from this structure and
Mm.
foundation. See, I'm sure you have some perspective too.
Yeah, no, for sure. And let's talk about like impact, right? How do you know an EVP is working? What are some of those indicators that tell you it's impacting the culture, the employee experience, organizational performance ultimately, right? You mentioned that as being a key thing that the EVP needs to drive. What are
Yeah.
some indicators that tell you that it's working?
I think that is so important. And we are incredibly lucky at Sun Life to have a very advanced people analytics team. We have been thinking about and measuring aspects of our culture and employee experience for a long time and really maturing that practice. I would say when it comes to, the question you pose, Z, which is how do we know it's working? How do we know it's impacting employee experience? How do we know it's having organizational impact? I would take three lenses. I would say we need to pay attention to what employees are saying, and we do that through things like pulse surveys. We look at, the external, unfiltered perspective on what employees are saying. Um, and I think even more helpful than some of those scale of 1 to 5 responses are the comments. And AI has given us a huge advantage here in really taking massive amounts of employee feedback and giving us what are they saying really? What are the themes here? Where do we need to lean in? And so I think what employees are saying gives us a real insight about how they're feeling about their employee experience. The second layer would be, what are they doing? And employees may tell us something, just like you might say you value exercise. But if you're not exercising, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. And so I think in addition to looking at what employees are saying about their experience, we want to look at what they do. Are they staying with the organization? Are our high performers, moving around, choosing to give discretionary effort and grow within your organization? Are people referring people? It's one thing to hear it through a pulse survey, and quite another thing to see from a behavioral standpoint. What are we seeing? So I think what do our people say? What do they do? And then the third lens leans into that organizational impact piece, which is, what are our clients saying and doing? Because ultimately, how we are on the inside should permeate our walls. It should impact the client experience in a very similar way. And so we want to keep pulse on client feedback. How do they perceive the organization? Um, and is that aligned with or misaligned with what we say we want as an organization, or our culture and our EVP? So I think with those three, and our clients coming back, our clients staying with the organization, do they buy again, right? Do they want to continue to do business with us, is hugely indicative of the internal health of the organization, the internal experience of our employees.
Yeah. And I love
Yeah.
how it's like you're looking at it very comprehensively, end to end, right? Internal, external, client, like it's all at the end of the day connected. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's what we call the human value chain. There is
Mm-hmm.
the impact to the customer is ultimately coming from how leaders are shaping those experiences and getting people aligned to deliver on that experience. That's amazing. When you think about the future of EVP, employer brand, and the role it's going to play, how do you see it evolving in the next few years?
I mean, I think the organizations that will be most successful in this space are going to be thinking about EVP not as a silo. They are going to be thinking about integrating it with and across not only the broader HR programs, but leadership, other organizational systems. If you're in an organization where this sits in TA, it is incumbent on you to connect with your brand or marketing department, your communications department, your other HR stakeholders, your leadership team, because I think the only way that there is persistent value in working on your EVP is if it is really deeply integrated from a systems perspective across all of these areas, where you are influencing and driving accountability to the other areas of the organization, and you're all working together. Leadership excellence, and expectations drive outcomes in this space. What we communicate drives what we achieve in this space, who and how we reward, all of these things. So, again, I think looking to the future, it's really that, get out of your silo, think about this broadly, and bring the right people together to ensure you have the influence you need.
We should ask before we close off today, two questions. One, what do you think is most special about the employer brand and experience at Sun Life?
Yeah, I mean, I have had an exceptional experience at Sun Life. I've been the um, beneficiary of an incredibly strong culture and employee experience. I would say we have an organization that cares deeply about not only our clients, but the people who work for the organization, and we care about making an impact on communities and clients. So there's really that sense of, humanity that's a deep, deep part of our organization. Um, I have felt that from day one, and I think that's a really critical piece. I think also we are, you know, a company that's been around for a long time. That means we've got a really solid foundation. We have persisted through some of the most challenging times in history, which means we are constantly reinventing ourselves. We are always growing, adapting, challenging. And I think that's something that most people would say we're not doing. You look at an established organization and you think, you know, they're just resting on their laurels, so to speak, and that's absolutely not the case. So we are pushing boundaries. We are thinking about how, you know, generative AI fits into our workflows and our processes, and we're layering on that human lens. So we've got that both sides of the equation there. And I would say there's just so much ambition in this company to deliver on our purpose, to be excellent, and you know, as an employee being part of that, I have had incredible opportunities for growth and development at this organization. I've been invested in from a learning standpoint. I have worked with incredible teams that are, you know, pushing their own boundaries, and doing things differently. So it's a really incredible organization to be a part of, and maybe not what you would think from the outside
Yeah.
looking in.
Yeah. I know I shared this with you, but years and years ago, I mean, I just celebrated my 27th anniversary and I got married when I worked at Sun Life.
Okay.
And and then I felt the humanity and the care for people and clients. And it's beautiful to see how it's still prevalent today, Zishan. I know from all of the internal conversations we have that you feel it in all of your interactions as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's a special place to work for. I mean, I haven't worked there, but it was my first ever client at Blue Ivy, so I almost feel like so I can connect with a lot of what you said, Kristen. Just being from a being someone who's been kind of on the peripheral, but it's a special place for sure.
Any last advice, Kristen, that you want to share with listeners that are in the midst of building their EVP, or they're just about to begin the process of exploring?
Yeah, I think it's so important, again, as we think of ourselves and the objective we have, the thing we want to deliver, to really begin thinking about who do I need to bring together for this to be successful. Um, that aim for a cohesive narrative, that whether I'm talking to a client, an employee, a leader, I'm getting the same message because it's repeated in our external consumer brand. It's repeated in our talent attraction materials. We're seeing things in our leadership development um, focus, you know, and what we do and how we invest in our people. I just think it's so critical to bring the organization together around this. And so, you know, stakeholdering is a such an important aspect of successful creation and deployment of something. You really need an ecosystem around an EVP, around your culture, so that it is lived and experienced and delivered in the eyes of your people and in the eyes of your clients.
That's a perfect place to leave it, because we know just how challenging stakeholdering is. It is that often underestimated part of building an EVP and accomplishing all the things you talked about today. Thank you so much for joining us. You are really one of the most delightful people to work with, and you inspire us to do better every single day.
Well, thank you. It's
Thanks,
been
Kristen.
amazing
Thank you.
conversation, Stacy and Z. And you know, really enjoy also the opportunity to work with you on this really important work. this conversation has been one that is just really, it keeps the energy going. I have a lot of energy for this work, but it's so wonderful to explore the angles, really talk about the impact. I think we can get consumed sometimes by the day to day and just progressing on the next thing. But this was a great, opportunity to
Really good.
lift the eyes up to the horizon and think about, why do we do this work?
Yeah.
And what is
Yeah.
the impact that we're ultimately having? And it's critical. So thank you.